very good afternoon. Welcome. Namaste to all the participants who've chosen to spend the next hour or two with us on the Saturday, December 5th. Thank you very much. Welcome to yet another edition of Nice Aarohana. This is going to be a very exciting session because we've got somebody who runs, one of India's or perhaps the best known home decor and fashion uh, outlet called Jaipur. And before we get to that, a few housekeeping tips. As always, participants will remain muted, and you can ask your questions in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screens, and keep your questions, very brief and directed. Please send mail to arohana@niceorg.in, and your emails will be responded to you. And certificates, as always, like I said, 75% of the sessions need to be attended, and then you receive your certificate of participation. I'm sure you know that this is also getting streamed live on Facebook at Facebook, that way on the nice org.in on Facebook. You can stay connected on our LinkedIn pages. The links are provided there. You can also watch the recording of all our sessions on YouTube. So I'd encourage you to please go and check out the YouTube link that's mentioned in the who's the business head of Jaipur at Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail. So good afternoon and welcome, Rashmi. And so now we will launch into a conversation with her about uh, Jaipur, about what she sees as important trends, insights, and learnings about this whole business of fashion and home decor. And as you know, Jaipur is part of the Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail uh, business of the Aditya Birla Group. So once again, a very warm welcome to Rashmi, and let's launch
Hi,
into this whole
Sanjay.
session. Thank you. And Rashmi wanted to have this chat with you to really understand first, before we get into the business of Jaipur, just help us very quickly understand, your own profile, how you came to be the head of Jaipur, which is, really the most well-known brand today in the country in its space.
Absolutely. So, one first, congratulations, Sanjay, for starting this initiative. I think it's really nice that the movement is increasing around the whole soft economy of the country, and may this tribe grow. So, I want to wish the team a very, congratulations and all the best for growing this movement. About myself, I've been in the industry, I've been a part of the industry for about 2 decades now. I started my career in exports. Those were the heydays of, when Indian exports were in the top three of contributing to the economy. From there on, after a couple of years, I moved to Madura Garments, which is now known as Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited. Our portfolio runs across some of the leading brands of the country, from Louis Philippe, Allen Solly, Van Heusen, Peter England. We also have retail formats. So we have a large retail format called Pantaloon at the value segment. And also at the luxury segment, we have the Collective. We also have, in our portfolio, our innerwear business. So at multiple demographic and at multiple consumer segment, we play and we lead those businesses. In our early years, our portfolio was skewed towards menswear, but in the last decade, we've been wanting to have purposeful, meaningful business and participate in what is now the growing she economy. And hence, we've made inroads there. In the last couple of years, we've been wanting to build up a purposeful business in the Indian ethnic space. And around the time that we were looking to either build a brand ourselves or maybe look at somebody meaningful as a partner, is when we happen to have our conversations with the Jaipur team. And that's how the acquisition came along. Stepping back a little bit, For our audiences, Jaipur.com was a startup started by Shilpa and Puneet, and they are well known names in the craft sector. They started out as building up a marketplace for bringing India's most unique finds and sometimes even international unique finds to the consumer, and managed to build a unique portfolio of the artisanal Indian finds. They were also consciously looking for a growth partner after having built a beautiful niche business. And I think some of the synergies kind of met together, the kind of brand that they had built and the kind of value that we were wanting to bring around on the table. So that got together. And last year, Aditya Birla acquired the Jaipur business. We personally are very excited about it, and we believe that the Indian ethnic space has huge potential. I mean, it is the core of our fashion wardrobe, honestly. But for the longest time, it has remained unorganized, and it's in the last decade that some amount of organized branded retail play has begun in this, and which is where the growth parameters are coming from. So that's what we are at a personal space. Also, I'm very excited. After leading multiple initiatives within the Aditya Birla portfolio, working in the men's space, working in the fast fashion space, working with the young millennial space, to now culminate all of this and work with a homegrown Indian brand and build on the ethos of what is called the indie power. So that's a little brief.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, I think I'll come back to that point you made about indie power and this new thing, new view that you have about the growth that you see in the so-called indie power segment. I must also inform everyone that NICE is a initiative started not just by me, but my colleague Hari Kiran and a bunch of others who are here on this call. You'll see their names there. Arunima, Chitra, Arvind, Bala, Kotiji, a whole bunch of folks who have all come together, essentially motivated by the cause, right, of trying to build something for India, which will use some of the artifacts of India itself. Now coming back to the conversation, you told us about your own self and about how Jaipur came to be. Now, given where it is today, what is your view about Jaipur as an organization? Meaning, how is it organized? How does it look at working with artisans on the one hand, and then reaching out to end consumers on the other? Just help us understand broadly what that looks like from a structure
So,
strategy.
at a primary level, the way the business was built up, it was a .com. And we have this beautiful website, which I urge all the participants to look at. What we do very differently, and I would like to call out a few things, that we are not the regular mill e-commerce player. We also believe in doing things very differently. So we actually have we get lauded for being one of the most differentiated, visually aesthetic platform where the value of product is only added and enhanced and not very transactional. And we believe a lot of work around storytelling. There is craft is you're not selling products, you're selling craft, you're selling stories. So there is a lot that goes in the product. There is a lot of emotion that goes in the product that the consumer has to buy into, and that's what Jaipur does very, very beautifully. In the space of how do we see the business going forward, at a level, it is understood that once you have a .com, you should be able to reach to all the pin codes of the country. But I think after a decade of heady e-commerce, the equilibrium has arrived that it has to be a balance of an offline and online. So while e-commerce helps you on discovery, and that little 6-inch device in all our hands is now the great retail space of discovering everything that we want to discover at our convenience, at our time. But we've seen time and again with our open house circuit, with our exhibition circuit, with our pop-up circuit, with the couple of stores that we have opened, that they bring a completely different value of experience. So a combination of offline and online going forward would be the way forward.
Got it. So you're basically saying that the hybrid model, online and offline, the online essentially being a discovery mode, offline is more for the experience and fulfillment and things like that. Uh, what is interesting is that clearly there are many models that are emerging today, right? I mean, there's an omni-channel model, there's pure direct-to-consumer online, and all that. So we'll get to that in a moment. But given your experience of being in this fast fashion business, and now with this Jaipur brand, since Aditya Birla Fashion acquired it, if you were to step back a bit and look at the entire landscape, what would you say are the two or three important things you see vis-a-vis the opportunities, vis-a-vis the trends that are occurring in today's India, as opposed to what happened, let's say, 5 years back, and that gives you the confidence to really talk about, let's say, an indie power?
Very interesting question. How I like to put it is that there are micro trends and what is called fads that happen in bursts of small periods. And then there are mega and macro trends, which probably sometimes lie over a decade or whatever. So if we step back a couple of decades, India was always a green country. Our mothers always reused things and did mending and did rafu, and the hand me downs, what our generation now calls pre-loved. We were always a green country, and then came a decade where industrialization and mass consumption and the glitter of the cheap and cheerful led to the growth of a completely different kind of consumption. That was also an era where you would believe, and it's a part of our conversation that we've had earlier also, where uh, all things foreign were more attractive. But as India gains its place in the global, pecking order, and we become far more confident of what we are. In that era, the previous era where Desi was not considered cool, I think we are back. We've kind of run a whole circle where as consumers we are far more confident of our own product.
Desi is becoming cool in a way.
This is it's not, and I don't want to use cool, the word cool, in a frivolous manner. uh,
Right.
being able to flaunt your own roots is far more, in India there's a new India confident. The new generation, the new millennials are even more confident of their own product. The previous generation did kind of fly by on a phase, a fad where international and foreign was cool. Now there is a balance. Of course, there are things that you seek from, it's a flatter world. We travel abroad and we travel within India. Uh, but the whole self consumption of local, the self consumption of indie cool, the self consumption of what we have built together is growing back. And that's what I call the indie cool, the indie power, that now there is even an extra badge of pride in consuming indigenous and local. And I think, while COVID has been tough on a lot of fronts, at a lot of businesses and at personal levels, it has also, as opportunities in crisis, has made the whole movement of slow fashion and of taking a pause and of conversation around mindful consumption has increased. And that is what makes businesses like ours at Jaipur, and there are a lot of other brands who are doing very good work in this space. It's made all of that far more meaningful today. So
So, yeah.
we would like to believe that COVID has kind of accelerated that conversation.
So one is you're saying that there is a more confident, let's say, consumer, very confident in their own roots, confident in local products, consumption, etc., which is an important thing. The second is you said mindful consumption, meaning
Yes,
not conspicuous, not wasteful, but where people pay attention to what they're buying and why they're buying, right? And for what
absolutely.
end goal, etc. So that's another very big important trend that you're seeing, and you therefore believe that the opportunity for, let's say, quote unquote, the indie power to ride on this, given the size of the demographic, etc., is very, very strong and powerful, right? That would be a fair
Absolutely.
characterization. Now,
Absolutely.
Now, you've talked about the trends, and therefore, what specific areas would you say present opportunities? Meaning, is it inside the home, within the home? Is it a particular, let's say, bed, bath, linen? Is it, home decor type? Is it fashion? When you say fashion, is it, the casual fashion, or is it, party wear, or, stuff like that? Where do you see the opportunities?
So I think opportunities are emerging in all sections, and interestingly enough, COVID has managed to push all businesses to pivot what their consumer offerings were and make them a little more relevant to what is now called the new normal. Um, Jaipur, as a brand, we position ourselves at some level of uh, premium craftsmanship. Um, and we have a lot of offerings around what is called occasion wear. But come COVID, globally we were all confined to our homes, and people were not looking at wearing chanderi silk kurtas at so we had to repivot and relook at how we can participate in the day wear wardrobe of the consumer, and a lot more cotton, a lot more natural fabrics, a lot more we were talking to consumers all the time to ensure we have our ears to the ground. A lot of women consumers say that now we're switching between the kitchen and the Zoom screen, seam, and we need clothing for that. You have to be ready for both, and a lot of people were asking for far more comfortable sleeves, for example. So we heard the consumer, and we launched collections which were far more friendly for the whole work from home regime. So there is a new trend around what you may loosely call casual, and trends of some athleisure wear that kind of moved into ethnic wear. The fabrics had to be more stretchy and comfortable. The sleeves have had to be more loose and yet more presentable on screens, and what is called above the keyboard fashion. Kind of invest in that, and then these are actually these trends that kind of define how your collections are designed.
True.
So that's what is happening in the apparel section. In the home section, we saw very, very interesting trends. The first month, of course, the country went into a lockdown and people were focused on essentials and health, etc. But after spending the first 30, 45 days, once people were kind of settled in their new rhythm, um, home became the place that it always deserved to be, because you were spending far more disproportionate time in that sanctuary of your own, and people started looking at their spaces very, very differently. So home, that used to be a smaller part of our business at the beginning of the lockdown, actually saw unprecedented growth. um, One, from utility section, because now people needed far more bed sheets and linen and pillow covers, etc., which is very utility. But people started looking at home upgrades, and we saw the first trends when suddenly art started selling a lot in lockdown. Which is when we realized that this whole time being spent on home, people are relooking at redoing their places, upgrading, finding joys in every day, and which is what gave trend to a separate growth in home linen, home decor, and kitchenware. In the kitchenware again, and like I go back to the whole indie power thing, um, because people are consciously now asking, what am I putting in my, what am I wearing and what am I putting in my mouth. There's an absolute increase in what is called alternate cookware, which used to be actually traditionally the cookware of our grandmoms, but cast iron cookware, brass cookware, kansa, tamba, all of these have seen increased search and increased sale on our platform.
Oh,
So people
fantastic.
wanting, immunity boosting was the key word. And people were looking at alternate ways of, how can I increase immunity by better cookware, uh, by what am I putting into it. Food has been a completely new section on immunity boosting. So there has been a growth trend across departments, in fashion, in home, and in decor. All three have seen um, trend growths that have been changed because of what how COVID has changed how we look at things.
Fantastic. In fact, this is really perhaps the best insight or market research one can do. In other words, when you're actually seeing what people are buying as opposed to what
Absolutely.
people say they will buy, right? I mean, that's a big
Yes.
difference. Now, in going forward, do you see a lot of these trends, these purchase items, etc.? Which ones of them do you see continuing post COVID? Let's assume, let's say, same time next year. And which ones do you think will drop off, or do you see some new segments emerge post COVID?
I think a hybrid of it will stay, because as what we call the post-COVID new normal, the world will readjust into a combination of work from home and work from office. I think that's another narrative that's happening across
Right.
global companies and national companies. So a home office would be a reality, and then relative comfortable clothing around the home office is going to stay, whether in menswear, where we saw an increase sales of joggers in our menswear portfolio, or whether it's, well, like I said, sleeves and neckline took a completely different fashion interpretation in the COVID time. So some of these trends are here to stay. Even in the fashion section and home section, home beyond the COVID thing had been a growing trend in the country. In the pecking order of roti kapda makan also comes in that whole necessity bit. So after you do the basic roti, basic kapda, basic makan, to better roti, better kapda, better makan. And the younger generation has been buying their houses, and your address is your new personality, and you want to dress up your home because it's an extension of you. So the home business section has in any case been growing. Now that we got lucky to spend so much time in our homes, we are looking at our spaces even more deeply and differently. So according to me, a large part of these trends will stick on and stay on.
Wonderful. So that must be very heartening to all the participants and also to builders and developers who are also looking at coming up with buildings. A bit of a context switch now, Rashmi. You work on the supply side, right, with a lot of people on the who are artisans of various kinds who help produce wonderful products. And so there's a sourcing element to all of this. Then there is a curating merchandising piece. And then there is a retailing piece, right? And three broad buckets, if I can say so. Can you talk a bit about these and how Jaipur does it, and so that it becomes of interesting insight to the participants? Meaning, how do you go about the sourcing? What are some of the challenges? And of the three, which is the most important? Because I remember you used a very nice phrase when we spoke last. You said the science of merchandising, and
Yes.
if just sort of you talk us through that, because I think that will be extremely valuable to everybody.
Referring to that, the fashion, or I shouldn't even say the fashion, the creative space, and I always believe in this, there is an art side to it and there is a science side to it. um, the art side of it is what Jaipur was doing very beautifully always, and I think the value that ABG brings to the table is the science side of it, and that's why it's a beautiful marriage. So you bucketed things into sourcing and retailing. What was the one more thing that you said?
The curating slash merchandising, all of it.
Curating slash. So in see, sourcing in the craft world is definitely a different ball game altogether. The supply chain works very differently to, let's say, what is called the mill-made sector. Um, and the business, for people who are entering these businesses, let's say, they need to be cognizant of the fact that the ecosystem and the space that you are talking to is very different. The artisans, while in the last decade a lot of organizations have worked very hard to handhold the artisan and coach them and train them, and technology has helped, and WhatsApp has been a great leveler. So I have artisans who do not have access to ERP systems and cannot make bills, but they can send their bills on WhatsApp, and that's at least a great leveler. So technology has helped in that terms. Having said that, um, it requires one to be far more patient in this system, because it is not an organized system. You know, the as the movement grows and as the tribe grows and as more people join, yes, a lot of investment is going into the sector to teach and train and make it a little more accountable and more organized. But it is a slightly more patient system. The artisans are very, very skilled people. They're far more skilled than you and me. And actually, we are the guardians of that art and craft, because if we don't do our part of the job carefully, we will lose these beautiful art and craft to, you know, legacy. So we have a role to play in this. And what large corporates have to bring to table is patience capital. It is very critical. um, uh,
Right.
Hyper growth sounds very attractive, and we must focus on that. But taking the artisans along and going the long way and ensuring that we make a larger change to the ecosystem does require patience capital. So, in the sourcing part of things,
Got it.
things erratic. Um, and there's been enough talk, I'm sure that must have happened on your platform only, that how nature plays a very large role in the whole sourcing craft bit. You know, monsoon will always play a very large role in printing of fabrics, natural fabrics. Sunshine plays a very large role. So these are not factors which affect the mill-made sector, where things are made in a very organized manner in controlled environments. Craft is also dependent on nature, and hence folks who are wanting to do business around the craft sector needs to have a deeper understanding of how the sourcing part will work. Then will come the finance, capital, and microfinancing part of it, and we have to ensure that that cycle is faster and agile, and the artisan has access to capital for them to you know, let the cycle continue. And I think with the larger corporates entering in, you know, even the bigger e-commerce are now, you know, playing their role in bringing the Samarth and the Karigar platforms on board. So a whole lot of access to capital is what will uh, infuse a sense of accountability and quality that will happen in that sector. So there are two parts to that coin. One is that when you work with handicraft and handloom, um, you can't have quality as consistent as mill-made. So the buyers have to set their expectation right. Having said that, on the other side, not everything can pass by saying the defect is an effect.
Right.
So there has to be a right balance between uh, what is called a considered acceptable quality from handicraft and handloom. And that becomes the backbone of sourcing right, because if you don't source right, then you don't sell right, and when you don't sell right, you end up blocking a lot of inventory. And I think that becomes the bane when you are trying to do business. Not sold inventory becomes probably the largest choke point of a business.
Right.
Sourcing right and buying right are probably two skill sets that new entrepreneurs should focus a lot on. Then, when we get down to the retailing part of things, um, India is many countries. We are way too many demographics. We are way too many kind and type of consumers and type of body types. So we need to focus on, depending on what our scale and size and aspiration are, geography will play a large role. If you are national, um, east of India, size sets will be very different than west of India and north of India. Color choices in south of India will be very different than color choices in north of India. And all these is what adds to the vibrancy of what is called the social fabric of our country. But when you are basing the science of merchandising on this, sending the right stock to right places is the differentiator between a successful bottom line and working capital getting stuck.
Got it. And thereafter comes the retailing of it, right? I mean, once you've
Thereafter, so when you start, let's say, expanding your retail footprint and start opening stores, geographical catchment assessment has to be really taken into account. And that is what will help you do differential geographical merchandising in different stores. One rule applying to the entire country. In some products, it may, but largely we take immense pride that every state cooks their rice also very differently.
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Immense
Yeah.
pride, and that's what is the beauty of our country. So we have to marry those local nuances, local preferences, while keeping the brand handwriting singular, to be able to do a far more scientific retailing.
Got it. So effectively, what is happening, if I understand you right, is that while the artisan and the work that they do, there's a lot of art, a lot of intuitive understanding of what has to be built by them and how they build it. That is on one side. That is married in with a strong process, married with strong design, married with strong, let's say, metrics or the science-based inputs that a large corporation like yours is able to provide. And the fusion of these two results in a more or less consistent, high quality product that reaches the end retailers. Is that a fair way
Yes,
of thinking about it?
it would be a fair way. The only one little thing that I would like to add is, when you say intuitive, um, the one thing that the artisans need to consistently invest into, and buyers have to help them, is to consistently update what they're doing, because for them to stay relevant in the new contemporary world, the product has to stay meaningful and relevant. Lots of consumer are today wanting to consume indie, and there is a lot of work that's happening at the grassroots level. There's a lot of work that the government emporiums have done. There is a lot of work that cooperatives have done. But I think if we genuinely want this movement to take a different size and scale, what's also happened is that a lot of design intervention hasn't happened with the artisan, and they've been making the same design over decades. um, for that industry to get a little disrupted and become more meaningful to a large amount of consumers, um, a lot of design collaboration must happen with the artisans. So the skill is humongous. They need to consistently invest in newer, fresher designs.
Got it. And on the retailing side, so somebody, let's say, now has got access to multiple products, be it in the home, be it in fashion, be it in the kitchen, and so on. How does one think about retailing fashion and home? What are some of the key things that entrepreneurs need to keep in mind with regard to dealing with products in as varied as fashion and home decor from a retail standpoint?
So when you say retail, you are meaning stores, or are you saying
I
e-commerce
mean,
retail?
stores as
It's a
well as
combination
online.
of both.
Yeah,
So
as
I
well as
think
online,
the good,
online and offline.
yeah. So the good thing is that the entry barriers for setting up a quick, easy website via Shopify or something else, or now even WhatsApp commerce or Instagram commerce, has lowered the entry barriers for entrepreneurs to be able to reach consumers. So I think that gives everybody the first quickest flavor of being, what online does beautifully is you can do experiments. You can do quick small experiments to see what sells and what doesn't. What digital advertising allows you is to also take your product or take exactly what you're trying to do and also advertise to a specific geography and see what the response is. And once you have kind of perfected that process over a period of time to figure out preferences of product, of what you're wanting to sell, then is when I think we can look at expanding to offline and see, exactly where your traffic's coming from, exactly where interest is coming from. And sometimes traffic and conversion can come from very different places. And we've seen this in our business. So you need to see what product is getting relevant to which consumer and which geography, and then tweak your offering accordingly. that's
So, how
that's that's what e-commerce allows you to do.
okay. So the analytics on e-commerce helps you really determine a lot of these things.
Absolutely.
Got it. And in the physical world, what would you suggest?
In the physical world, like I said, and I mentioned it briefly earlier also, um, a lot of intelligence and thought has to be put, because in the e-commerce world, one website is catering globally. Any consumer is able to see, and a more discovery-led consumer is able to reach you after hunting with a few key intelligent smart words. But in the physical store, your inventory gets locked at that physical location, and
Right.
if it's not relevant to that catchment and that particular geography, then it is not so quick to cut losses in the physical space. And which is why I stress on the whole geographical merchandising, understanding catchment, understanding adjacency, and understanding the nuance of consumer preference of that area in
Got
terms
it.
of color, fit, size, and which is what a function called planning in your organization. And it's not, people should not confuse, and younger entrepreneurs should not confuse this with a large complicated department. Excel sheets can look boring and a little overwhelming sometimes, but a quick one person who's quick at crunching a few numbers. Because what happens in e-commerce, um, there is a large plethora of data available to you. For the first time, we actually have access to real time data. You are able to pinpoint uh, X consumers sitting in Bareilly accessing through which model of phone and is spending how much time on your website. And you can actually then customize it. The point is that we need people who can read that data for us. So uh, early on, when people can afford, data reading is what will help you customize retailing to different geographies. And that's very important.
So the way I think the industry or the market or the consumer behavior is trending, the answer lies in getting access to the data and churning it and doing the analysis, right? And that sort of provides the insights. Now,
Different
in
quick trends.
quick trends, that's right. Now, in the case of the nice Aarohana programs, so many entrepreneurs are part of the program. If they need to work with a large platform such as yours, Jaipur, and I'm a small vendor, I'm a merchandiser, or an artisan, or I have a small platform. I want to explore a partnership with somebody like a Jaipur and say, hey, look, I have access to these new kinds of products and designs and all of it and materials. How does that work? Meaning, first, is it possible to work with Jaipur like that? And if so, what do I need to do to engage with Jaipur?
Absolutely. So we have a team that helps onboard vendor partners, and we have an accessible email called hello@jaipur.com. So anybody who works in the space of handicraft, artisanal products, people reach out to us. At our website, we have links there. To be able to reach us, and we have teams to help assess. We have a very simple framework of how we take vendors on board, in terms of product and in terms of what craft and what value that brings to the portal. We have some simple guidelines on how products are, either they are shot by the artisan, or we also provide help to artisan on shooting their products and doing the photography bit, because some artisans do not have access to that. So we
Right.
have a fully equipped studio with our own system where we help the artisan do that. We also provide artisans, like for example, recently in a program called Artisan Direct, where post the lockdown there were a couple of there were a lot of artisans actually who had their orders cancelled, and they were trying to reach out to e-commerce platforms in the country. So a couple of us came together to help these artisans, and we handheld them on costing their products, on pricing them right for the consumer, on shooting from remote locations. So we also provide access to these kind of services, and we help them onboard them. It's a simple process.
Simple process. And what about, let's say, smaller companies who are not just on the artisan side, but let's say they're like super mini or micro Jaipurs? Is there
Sure.
a partnership arrangement with such folks? Is that available?
So we do work with artisans who also have their own websites. We have
Uh, okay,
brands on our portal,
understood.
where these brands, one, are running their own website, but they are also keen on partnering with larger platforms, and they reach out to us, and we follow the similar norms and onboard them. So far, the product and quality and framework of craftsmanship meets a certain basic standard.
Right. And then, if I understand you right, you also provide guidance to them on how they should be thinking about their own products with regard to, trends and,
Yes.
correct? So that's also
Yes.
very helpful. Excellent. Great. So some questions are coming in, and what I'm going to do is, look at some of the questions, and I will have you respond to them in no particular order. Um,
Yes.
there's a question, or a couple of questions have come in from Bhavna. She says she's got two questions. One is, how do you provide design guidance, or do they use their own creativity leading into, or do you have to hire a designer to get products out?
Okay, so there are vendors who approach us for white labeling, in which case they are willing to produce. We also have our own private label called Jaipur, and under the private label, we produce goods under fashion and apparel, under home, under jewelry. So there are vendors who are keen to service Jaipur, the brand, and in that case we provide the design assistance, and we have a team of designers who design products across fashion and apparel, and vendors who have capability to manufacture artisanal products. We partner with them to build beautiful products. In case you are wanting to only onboard your product on our website, currently we do not have a design assistance capability, but we are building it for the future, because we do get multiple queries regarding that, because there are a lot of small micro entrepreneurs who have great intent but are looking for some help on design hand. So for future we will build up that arm.
Excellent. And that will be very useful.
But
Uh,
for white labeling we do provide design assistance.
Understand. Second question from Bhavna is it okay to have different merchandise in different cities for the same brand? And does it impact the brand itself or consistency?
So Bhavna, I think the guidelines and the guardrails of brand handwriting have to be common. And, there is a certain thread of consistency that runs across all your product. But like I said, that there are geographical nuances on color, size, and taste. Those can be and should be customized to geographical preferences. For the longest, brands were a little uptight about this, that this is my brand and this is what it is and this is what consumers should buy. But I think in the growing open world, the brand is also hearing the consumer far more carefully, and interpreting those nuances in the in your brand offering. So like I said, if bright colors work in Punjab and pastels and creams work in Chennai, and I'm not saying this as stereotyping, these are consumer preferences. You have people who buy bright colors in Chennai, and you have people who buy pastels in Punjab. But when you analyze your data, you will find a large analysis of saying these colors work more in this geography. So it is good to customize your offerings for geography. The
Okay.
answer in short is yes, it's good to, because we are a very, very large nation. We are not a small nation where uh, motherhood handwriting can cover all. Some of your key hero products will sell across the country and they would be winners, and there you will produce large depth. But some others, it's good to customize to local preferences.
Got it. And another question that has come in is from Jhilam Dalvi, wants to know, what is there a sweet spot with regard to pricing of fashion items on e-commerce? Is there saying, what, if you've got a big range, if you price it between 1,500 and 2,000, that's like pretty much the sweet spot? Or is there any such number or some things for people to keep in mind if it comes to pricing?
I think before anyone answers that question for their business, they need to figure out what is the positioning of their business, because there are consumer segments, first jobbers, young workers, early access to disposable income. We've all worked in a different budget for our households. As our access to income increases, our proportion to what we are spending on which category also increases. So we have to first figure out on the value chain, where have you positioned your brand and business. And if you are a value business, then the sweet spot pricing of let's take kurta as a product. There is a market for kurta and kurtis from 499 to 999, and a lot of young college going girls and younger families are looking for solutions under 1,000 rupees access to fashion. And that allows you to play into a certain framework of fabrics and techniques that you can use on that product. As you move up, and you want to use embroideries and you want to use hand embroidery and hand printing, the value chain and the techniques keep adding value, and the product also becomes that much more premium. So then there is a premium segment, there's a luxury segment, and there is a designer segment. So we have to first fix which consumer audience are we catering to, and then within each segment, there is always a sweet spot. So let's say in the middle premium segment of ethnic wear, I think 2,500 to under 5,000 is a sweet spot. In the value segment, the under 1,000 rupee is the sweetest spot of what we call high rate of sale price point. So we need to figure out what's the consumer segment we are catering to, and within that, what is the sharpest MRP at which goods move at a accelerated velocity.
Got it. Uh, Another question from Jailam is also typically what kinds of budgets should one keep in mind for doing promotion um, within India, outside of India, if one is promoting a platform, approximately maybe as a percentage of sales. Let's say if I'm selling 100 rupees worth, I must plan for, let's say, 20 rupees, let's say, for marketing promotion activities. Is there some rule of thumb like that?
That's actually a tough one, because consumer acquisition actually is the most expensive cost on the whole business table.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Uh, so you'll have to see this differently. If I give you as a percentage of business and I say 10% to what you want to sell the product at a younger stage, it'll probably not be reasonable, sizable money.
it'll be a
So
lot
at
more.
a stage, the percentage to business of marketing expense will be slightly higher. But as your business get a size and scale, then a 5% to your NSV marketing budget is all right. But in early years, you have to invest into exposure, visibility, word of mouth, and reference, and you will probably need to set aside an 18 to 20%.
Right.
But
So
this
what you're
this
saying is that,
percentage comes down as business scales.
yes. So in the early days, you're saying it's about 25, 30% or thereabouts for a young, small,
Because
nascent.
if you want to build a momentum of sale, see, early on you'll sell something, but if you want repeat consumer, if you want loyalty, if you want stickiness, you will have to build exposure to business. You will
Got
have to build eyeballs to business,
it.
and
Right.
hence you have to make some reasonable investment uh, in the tight bootstrapping of keeping unit economics still profitable.
Got it. Okay. There's a question that's come in also from Facebook. Um, when you source products from artisans, how do you take care of, let's say, intellectual property rights and so on of artisans along with while selling and merchandising products? Is there something like a mahilaprint.org or something like that that is involved in safeguarding IP?
So this is a growing question around in the entire creative industry, because a large part of creative industry claims to be inspired, and we
Yeah,
do our checks and balances honestly at the artisan training level, saying your work should be authentic and unique and differentiated. But I'll be honest, we've come across cases where there can be a duplication of work, etc. What happens in this new world is that the consumer actually keeps you at your feet all the time. In the new social world, there are checks and balances. One, we built at businesses. Also, our consumers become a check and balances of calling out. We get
Got it.
enough posts on our Instagram to say, hey, but we saw this there, and we are very quick, because at the core intent of it, we want to run this very, very ethically.
Yes.
At the core intent of it, this is what we want to tell the artisans also, and this is what we tell our own designer community also.
Right.
So I think as a mechanism of our internal checks and balances, and in future, I think technology will start helping us when Google image search becomes very
Correct.
strong, to be able to assess very quickly, is this product unique and authentic, or is it a copy.
Right.
I think as a combination of checks and balances that you build internally in your processes, to technology, to also collaborating with our consumers to keep businesses on their feet. Uh, the new world will operate in that framework.
Fantastic. So it's like,
But the intent has to be at
absolutely.
the right place.
Perfect. So intent has to be ethical, high integrity, and then you use the power of the network, which is the people, social media, and technology to make sure that things are not getting out of hand. Eh,
Also in the creative world, things do get, if you go to a Ajrak cluster, the same design is getting replicated in
That's
house after house, and then somebody will claim that this was my authentic. So as we speak along and as we grow, these things are developing as to what is all right to be called craft inspiration and what is uniquely
what is
patented.
uniquely designed. Right.
A parallel legal framework that's getting built up so that nobody's stepping on nobody's space.
Got it. No, and I think it's right. I mean, that it'll evolve as the business itself grows. Very important. Another question has come in from, I think, two or three people, and I will just, for example, Geet Srini has asked the question, and Kiran has asked the question, and so on. One of the questions is, as you start sourcing from artisans and others, partners, what are the typical onboarding expenses or commissions that are charged? Let's say if I'm a small vendor, I'm an artisan with my own website, you onboard me onto Jaipur, and then the sale happens, etc. For my calculating my economics, what are some of the mota metrics I have to keep in mind?
So different businesses and different business models operate differently. And I speak largely on the industry framework, not just Jaipur.
Right.
Uh, uh, the businesses are, I loosely just describe very quickly the business models. There are business models in which it's a sale or return model, in which the inventory goes to the seller, whosoever, whichever platform you're selling with. There is a model in which you keep the inventory, and we onboard the picture of your product, and as and when the order comes, we send the order to you, you ship the good to us, and we ship it to the consumer. There's also a marketplace model, a listing model, where we help you to reach the consumer by putting your product on the platform, and when the order comes, you ships it. Now each of these three different models have different uh, business service fees built in, and which can be anywhere between 18-20% to 35-40%, depending on, if the business is doing inventory management and product shoot and shipping on your behalf, then the business takes care of that. If you are taking care of shipping, then the margins are that much lesser and you take care of that cost. So things will be between 20 to 35%,
Got
depending on business model you sign up for.
it. Understand. Good. I think that's kind of fairly
Yeah.
standard. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
in commerce,
it's all depending on which business model you sign up
that's
from
right.
to 20 going up till 40,
Yeah.
is where you will have to shell out for, because in one model, the other business is spending on your behalf on shipping, packaging, shooting, model, everything.
Yeah. And
Another
yeah,
one, the business is allowing their platform to showcase your product.
true. Question from Sandeep Desai. Souvenirs, somebody sources products and for souvenirs. It's also very diverse. quite unorganized, pricing, quality, etc. vary. What would your top one or two uh, bits of advice be to an entrepreneur who's looking at, let's say, using fashion and home decor as souvenirs, souvenir products? What should they, or how should they think about it? Top one or two things.
Would you explain that a little bit? I don't understand the part that as souvenir bits.
And as offering it as a souvenir, let's say as a gift item or as a curio piece or something, or a piece of memorabilia from somebody, because the product will vary, and because the claim by Sandeep is that pricing, quality, etc. varies. It's unorganized. Therefore, if somebody wants to get into that business, what are some of the one or two or three things they need to keep in mind?
So is this like more like a B2B business where institutions are wanting to
Yeah,
customize
it could be
products?
B2B or it could be B2C. Just quick one or two things that you think will help the entrepreneur.
I think the rules roughly remain the same. The product quality has to be A class, because if you're trying to build business, there are no shortcuts. Only good quality and good service gets one repeat business. Um, if it is a B2B business, it allows you some economy of scale, because then you don't have to sell a single product, and then you're probably building, a particular business has said this one product I want to give it to my employees, etc. So it gives you some economies of scale. Um, and around services, the rules remain the same. If there's something that I haven't answered correctly about this question, I would be happy to connect with
Yeah.
some
Okay.
separate. Because I think as a souvenir part, I'm now very clear about the question, but I would be happy to engage with him one to one to
Understood.
help.
No, thank you. Thank you. And so typically, for example, in any of these e-commerce based businesses, one has to plan or budget for returns or refunds, right? So Namrata asks, typically, is there any rework that is required or returns or refunds? Can you just help us understand that?
A very important question again, because returns also are that fine line between, the bottom line. um, E-commerce, one of the accelerators of the e-commerce business has been the no question asked return. In the store, the returns were not so easy. In the physical space, you usually you return, you got a credit note sort of a thing, but e-commerce does a no question asked return. So if as a business, if your returns are beyond a certain percentage, it will hurt the PNL, which is why the investment in quality is not considered to be expensive. It is an investment towards keeping your returns low. Thankfully, in the craft space, um, the buyer, at least as of today, also is more purposeful and more keen on intent. Hence, overall in the craft industry, the returns remain below 5 to 6%, versus, let's say, 25 to 30% in the large e-commerce, horizontals.
Right.
Good thing. But as the base of consumption of craft increases, there is bound to be a spike in this return. The only way to avoid this is ensuring, one, quality; two, if you're playing in the apparel space, to get your fits right and be very transparent about it on the website, so that the consumer knows what they are buying. Because a higher percentage of return will hurt the business.
I understand. So, before we realized it, Rashmi, it's already 5 p.m. and time has literally flown. Thank you so much for taking the time for doing this.
The
And
pleasure is all mine, and
no, it's really
I think it was a
fantastic.
very interesting conversation.
Very nice. And it has been of great help to all the entrepreneurs here. Thank you once again. And with that, what I'm going to do is pass it on to Arvind for him to launch into his session. And Rashmi, all the some of the questions in case that we have not been able to answer, we will reach out to you and seek your responses to them. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you so much for providing an opportunity for this
Correct.
conversation. And like I said, may this movement grow and may this tribe grow,
Thank you.
and the indie pride grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thanks.